came about, society faced drastic changes. The Neolithic Revolution is the defining period of pre-civilization and the origin of domestication. This revolution shaped the face of many fertile new lands. It modeled the future of agriculture and pastoral-based civilizations. This revolution had one of the most significant transitions from nomadic lifestyles to coexisting civilizations. The Neolithic Revolution is defined as the period of the Stone Age, associated with the ancient agricultural revolution. It follows the Paleolithic period of human evolution. It is not a specific chronological event, but rather a period of behavioral and cultural changes, including the use of wild and domestic crops and animals.
From an economic standpoint, bartering was a major facet. Since there was not a currency, people traded within their own communities by bartering. This did not mean trading a good or service in exchange for money, but rather a situation similar to a young man trading his cow in order to marry a man's daughter. By definition, bartering is to trade by exchange of commodities rather than by use of money. Since there was not a currency, riches came from bartering. Economically speaking, this consisted of animals and food sources as well, which was a direct result from the agricultural revolution. The agricultural revolution was the change from food gathering to food production, which in essence was the Neolithic time period itself.
First evidence of culture among people was a number of cave paintings depicting animals found in underground caves. In addition to cave paintings, remains of wall paintings were found where people were adorned with the skins of wild leopards and men were buried with weapons of war and hunting. Animal cloaks were the first form of clothing, which dates about 26,000 years ago. The cloaks were made of the fur and hides of different animals, and they were sewn together by vegetable fibers and rawhide. The reason why food production outlasted foragers was because it had a better long-term effect. Population growth increased, and there was a better chance of more people surviving because of food for protection against natural disaster and droughts. The population of people in farming communities in Europe increased by a factor of 50 to 100. Farming communities were organized around kinship and marriage.
During this era, land cultivation became very common. Farming tools and weapons were being made to create an easier way of life. Crops were cultivated to be grown closer to the villages and in larger supply. Wild animals were also contained and bred to provide for the village. The first domesticated animal was the dog. It was most likely used to help with hunting. Other animals were domesticated for uses such as meat, fiber, and milk. Other animals, such as llamas, would provide wool for clothing and transportation. Early farmers had to face many challenges like starvation and disease. Learning how to store and save food and separate waste from drinking water helped to extend the life expectancy of many villagers. During this time, humans also discovered the science of fermentation, which allowed them to make beer. Later inventions of this period were the wheel, which was used in pottery, and metallurgy techniques.
In the time period known as the Neolithic Revolution, religious practices were typically associated with nature. The first people of this time period were mainly food gatherers, and their practices were revolved around springs and wild animals, while the pastoralists of this society worshipped a sky god whom they believed was in control of the weather and directed their migrations. However, when the nomadic people began to settle down and evolve into small farming villages and communities, their religion adapted into a worship of a woman, called the Earth Mother, who was thought to be the basis of existence. In addition, the people of the Neolithic period had ceremonial burials for the deceased to appease their descendants. These ceremonies were held in large structures called megaliths. These megaliths consisted of tombs for the dead, calendar circles, and large stones to help track the sun and its cycles. The people believed that by having these stones and calendars, they would be able to link the changing seasons to the rising of the deceased into heaven. Furthermore, in the town of Catalhuyuk, religious shrines were sacred and were present every 2 houses. In the homes, it was common for walls to be covered in paintings and drawings of animals such as wild bulls and leopards, women's breasts, gods and goddesses, and handprints. Religious rituals also included the sacrifice of animal meat and the burning of grains. Evidence based off the numerous and outnumbering statues of females suggests that goddesses were the basis of the worship.
During the hunting and gathering lifestyle period, women scavenged for food while taking care of the small children. Men hunted for animals to feed the clans. As small villages developed, more stable homes were made out of mud, clay, sticks, and rocks. Lineage was very important to the people living in the clans. Nuclear families lived together but separate from the rest of their tribes. Most of the clan came from common ancestors, and the deceased elders were a very important part of their religion. The towns grew and specialization became more common. A common village consisted of a central dwelling, ceremonial building, large storage food structures, housing, farming and pastoral land, guard towers, town protection walls, and religious centers. Specialization allowed more elaborate tools, weapons, and religious items to become readily available. These goods and crops were slowly traded with other clans. In the clan, men were the superior and ran the villages. Women took care of the family and buildings, while doing simple tasks in the fields. In
the Neolithic time periods, the political structure was far different than from the one we have today. There was not a set political arrangement because the Neolithic time period was not exactly a civilization. In fact, it was what allowed and led to all further civilizations to ever exist. The only main political aspect they had in the society was a unified group. They were individuals, but slowly they formed groups and worked together in making and doing things, in turn creating specialization to occur. Specialization is being advanced in certain areas. Having specialization made way for trade of goods and services in the future.
For the Neolithic Revolution, people had to get their food by hunting and gathering or foraging. The bulk of the nutrition people had in their diets were from wild vegetables and roots. Foragers had to know and understand the geography of the surrounding areas so they knew where their food sources could be found. Global climate changes drastically changed the geography of the world, which was believed to have caused the series of agricultural revolutions. The end of the Great Ice Age warmed lands to the point where agriculture was possible. Also, some theories suggest that shortages of wild food were common due to dry spells and population growth. The transition from food scavenging to food production first started when the foragers spread seeds of different plants across many different locations where they understood the geography and knew that it was fertile soil. They also discouraged the growth of competing plants by clearing them. By using this method of semi-cultivation, the people provided food for their civilizations for many generations. More food created in large amounts started when people began settling down and actually farming the fertile land. Shifting cultivation or swidden agriculture was also practiced, which was when farmers would leave fields fallow or abandoned to natural vegetation for a time so the fields could gain back fertility. Certain crops could not grow in all areas around the world because of soil quality and because of climate. For example, wheat and barley was not able to spread farther south because rainfall patterns in most of Africa were unsuited for their for their growth. During 8000 BCE, many Saharan farmers were able to grow some grains due to a particularly wet period. However, when drier conditions returned, many Saharan farmers ended up moving to the Nile Valley, where the annual flooding of rivers provided moisture for the soil. Southern China was able to grow rice because rice was best suited for warm and wet conditions. As climates and soils permitted, many communities in the Americas grew maize, manioc, beans, squash, and tomatoes. In Africa and Central Asia, pastoralism, or a way of life that was dependent on large herds of livestock, was necessary because of arid weather.
The Neolithic Revolution has an impact on modern-day civilization that contributes to the accomplishments and the technological advancements of the human race. This revolution contributed to our modern agriculture techniques and pastoral herding practices. The first civilizations to benefit from this were Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and the Indus River Valley. Without these essential building blocks, life would be drastically different.